Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our Avail Leadership Podcast. As always, it is a blessing to connect with everybody. My name is Virgil Sierra. I'm the Avail Leadership Media host, and I'm also the lead pastor of Vertical Church, also known as Iglesia Vertical in South Florida, where we are one church, two languages. And Avail Leadership is a brand for the Christian leader. We develop resources every month, books, studies, courses, videos, teachings, articles, even the Avail Journal, magazine style. Our aim is to produce practical, relevant resources to help you become a better leader, whether it's in the marketplace, in business, whether it's in ministry and church. Our hope is to add value to each and every one of you who connect with Avail. And today, I'm going to have the honor of connecting with well-known pastor, coach, and author Courtney McBath. We're going to be talking leadership and ministry regarding his new book, 4C Leadership, Lessons Learned from the COVID Virus. Man, we're honored that all of you leaders would take time to connect with us here. In addition to getting to know Bishop Courtney McBath a little bit better, later on in the podcast, we're going to be sharing some good details about how you can get your hands on this amazing book, 4C Leadership. I'm pretty confident that each and every one of us could benefit from learning these important lessons from the COVID virus as they have been inspired in Courtney McBath's heart. And so without further ado, I think it's time to get into this conversation. I'm excited, everybody, to jump into this amazing time of teaching and also Q&A with Courtney McBath. I had the opportunity of meeting Courtney and his lovely wife, Janine, at a pastor's retreat in Puerto Rico. He is the husband of Janine, father of 4 sons and a daughter and some grandchildren as well. He's the senior founding pastor of Calvary Revival Church in Norfolk, Virginia, which is a thriving church with thousands of members. He is also the leader and founder of Calvary Leadership Network. As I mentioned before, he's a teacher, a mentor, a coach, a global pastor. Courtney's heart is to educate and encourage leaders globally. He's already doing that in my life. Currently, Courtney leads pastors in 10 nations on 5 continents and is committed to coaching pastors for life. And so he's the man of the hour. Bishop Courtney McBath, we are excited and honored to have you here and to hear about your new book, 4C Leadership. Thanks for joining us.
Man, it is such an honor to be with you, Virgil. We had so much fun when we first met, and I just fell for you and your wife and the ministry you guys have. So to get this chance to be with you again, even though we're not in the same room, we're practicing physical distance, but we are spiritually connected, and we're just happy to be with you. This book is different for me. It's the 3rd or 4th one that I've written, but this one was kind of inspired, just kind of downloaded. I said, hey, I think I've got something that I need to get out there. Maybe at least when this thing is all over, it won't come out like 6 months, a year after the thing is done, but close on the heels of it. And so my instructions were, the only way that's going to happen, you'll have to write a chapter every day. And so for the next 14 days, the Lord just downloaded these 12 chapters into my spirit, and I wrote them, and I wrote everything in about 10 to 14 days, the basic manuscript. It's not long, it's not complex, but it talks about the issues of context, communication, collaboration, and contingency, and how you learn lessons when you're in warfare, like a pandemic or social injustice. When you're in real situations, you're not practicing leadership. You got to actually do it. And so it's when leadership is not sexy, it's real. It's on the front line. It's in the trenches. It's dirty. It's the real deal leadership.
It's that part. It's that part. It's that part of leadership that nobody tells you about, because everybody always thinks, "Oh, the leader." It's that real nitty gritty.
Exactly. That's exactly right, sir. And so for me, it was amazing because I believe that struggle and pandemics and crises are the breeding ground of real leaders. It's not by accident that so many great leaders of nations were also military leaders as well. That's not an accident. There are things that you learn when people's lives are at stake that you can't learn any other way. And so that's kind of what happened to me with this book. And I've just been amazed at how accepted it's been so far. And I'm just glad that you're giving me a chance to talk about it a little bit today.
100%. I think as I was delving into the book myself, I just realized, wow, this is really, really good. Aside from, the crisis that we may be in, I think no matter when somebody picks this up, they're going to be blessed by it. So I just want to thank you, Courtney, for just allowing, God to speak to your heart, and as a leader, as a pastor, as a person who is making a difference in the community. I think what you bring in this book is easy to digest for any person. So whether it's an up and coming leader, or it's a seasoned veteran leader, I think we can all really get into it with you and learn. Again, we are talking about the book 4C Leadership, Lessons Learned from the COVID Crisis. Courtney, I'd like to get into some Q&A with you about the book.
Let's do it.
Actually, and before we jump into the Q&A, I just said a little bit, but who's on your heart for this book? Who's your target?
Okay, this is a great question, because this thing has been zooming around in my head, the titleless leader.
Oh, wow.
So here's the deal. I think that in order for us to be able to handle the revival that God's going to send, if not in the lifetime of my ministry, at least in the lifetime of yours, I think it's going to take a whole lot of leaders that haven't yet accepted their call yet. They don't have a title right now, but they need to get prepared, quick, fast, and in a hurry. And so I think there's an army like Ezekiel 37. I think there's a valley of dry bones. There's an army that God's raising up. So when I wrote it, I did have in mind these principles that would help leaders who exist today. But I also felt like there was a target to potential leaders, so that the book is written in such a way that you don't have to have had a lot of leadership experience in order to take this and apply it wherever you are, in your house, at work, at school, in the fine arts, government, business, wherever. So I felt like it's somewhat far reaching in terms of who it could personally touch.
I love it. I love that. I love the way you put that, for the titleless leader, because we all know that you can have a title and not really be leading, right? And so that's really, really good. And before I get to question number one here, or let's make this question A, can you just hit on those 4 C's? What are the 4 C's of 4C leadership, which obviously are the focus of this book for everybody who's listening, because I know they're going to get hooked as soon as we start getting into the material?
The first C is context. It basically speaks of the need to know your surroundings.
So good.
Know who you're reaching, who you're trying to reach, who you're trying to sell your product to, who you want to as a client, because context then guides everything. Jesus made decisions based on context. He got in a context where they didn't believe very much. He didn't do very much. So that was the context. So if Jesus was guided by context, and certainly the rest of us, not Jesuses, are certainly going to be guided by that. So context is the first step. And then the next one is communication. Communication, not in the sense of who's a great writer or who's a great orator, but who actually can discover the people that they want to get a message across to and make the message palatable so that those people actually understand what it is they're saying. and can receive it. One of the things I learned in the crisis was that if people were hungry, which a lot of people were and still are, if they were hungry and my role was to feed them, then they didn't need a pretty message. They needed an effective message that got the information to them about what I had and how they could get it. And so I wasn't trying to be impressive. I was trying to make sure people got fed. It changed the way I saw communication. The third one is collaboration. For many people, that will be the most life-changing one, because one of the things that a crisis does is it immediately reveals your shortcomings, your deficits, the things that you're not able to do. Lots of times in leadership, we talk about what we can do, but I think there's a need for a conversation about what we may not be able to do, and the need then to connect with other people so that it gets done. So collaboration was a real big key for me, because I suddenly realized, I'll make this a similar reference. One of the specific things was not just food insecurity, but food insecurity among seniors. So I decided that I was going to try to feed the seniors across, I guess, 100-mile radius.
Wow.
So way out in the central part of our state, going that way all the way to the eastern shore. Courtney, you're not going to be able to do that by yourself. You're going to need other people to help you out. So I had a Catholic priest and an Episcopalian priest and some Baptist guys, and all collaborated because we could do more together than we could separately. And then the final one was contingency. This was the one that I'll have to help spiritual people understand, because somehow they think contingency planning is a really carnal, worldly thing to do. But I point out to them that the writer of Proverbs says that many are the plans that are in a man's heart or a woman's heart, but the purpose of the Lord, his plan, is the one that prevails. So that means God already says you'll probably start out with 3 or 4 plans. At least 3 of them, if you got 4, at least 3 won't work. The 4th one is the plan, is the purpose of the Lord. And that's okay. That's contingency thought. What do I do if this plan doesn't work? Or what do I do if things happen really good and I just wasn't expecting 3,000 people to get saved this weekend? Do I have a contingency plan for that? Every leader, every pastor is an interim pastor. So do we have a contingency plan for when she or he is no longer the leader? What will we do? So one of the things crisis teaches you is that if you're going to be successful, you got to have contingency plans, because you're going to have some plans that are not going to work. And if that's all you got, then you're in deep trouble. So that's the 4 C's. It's context, it's communication, collaboration, and contingency.
So good. So good. I want to get into some questions here, obviously about the book and about your experience, and feel free to add in any examples or stories that you have, that can emphasize it. I love what I'm hearing. There's a lot of C's here, because we're talking about, especially in crisis, we need to think about context. I love that chapter, by the way. We need to think about communication, collaboration, and contingency. Here's the first question. Courtney, what practical tips would you give to leaders who want to increase, here's another C, their capacity?
For Courtney, C's are not a problem. So I'm into C's. So they're fine with me. So let's talk capacity for a moment. Practical tips for capacity. I think, Virgil, the first thing that we do is we improve our friendship with God. I think because that is so assumed that oftentimes we don't address it. Mm-hmm. And so we have to make sure that we say, this is my friendship with God. If I'm going to improve on capacity, then that's one of the things that I have to do. Second one is then I have to expose myself to other leaders and read and get information, because information also improves capacity. But then it doesn't do much good to do all that, but then you don't exercise those things. Mm-hmm. So then there has to be then the exercise of the gift. So if a leader is going to have capacity, he's got to lead. He's got to do some things. He's got to make some things happen. And in the process, I think then capacity increases as a result. And one that I like, but that's because I make a lot of mistakes. The ability to bounce back when you fail, or when you do something that wasn't exactly what you wanted to do. I think every time I bounce back, one of my mentors, John Maxwell, wrote a book called Failing Forward. And so one of the things that I've learned is that it's not the failure, it's how much far further forward did you go when you failed. And if I learned from it, then I made steps forward. And so I think those are some of the practical steps for kind of increasing capacity.
That's great advice, and I think we are wise to hear from a leader and pastor and a coach who's been doing this for many years, Courtney. And you know, you look young, but I know there's some mileage in ministry, and there's some experience that you have had that many of us, you know, whether it's younger leaders or, like you said, titleless leaders, that can really grasp onto this. I love that. For those of you, you know, on this podcast, we're talking with Courtney McBath about his book, 4C Leadership, which are lessons learned from the COVID crisis. And we're just talking a little bit about what's on his heart and from his experience. Here's the next question, Courtney. Do you think trust can be restored in places where it has previously been broken? If so, what are some ways this can happen?
Well, you know, one of the things that happened a year or so before I wrote the book, I started reading a book by Stephen M.R. Covey called The Speed of Trust. One of the things that Covey mentioned in The Speed of Trust is that one of the myths about trust is that you can't restore it once it's broken. Now, a lot of people feel that way. You know, their attitude is, well, hey, what do? I don't have it. It's been lost, gone. But that's not true. Trust can actually be restored. Those of us who are married, we certainly hope it can, because we certainly do dumb things that, you know, we have to come back and recover from and get trust restored. If we lead people, then there are times that we have to trust must be restored for people. So trust certainly can be restored. And I think part of the steps for the restoration of trust for leaders is, one, taking responsibility. One of the things that I think just causes mistrust to propagate is when leaders won't take responsibility and are constantly blaming other people for everything that happens. That's a real issue. So I think once we take responsibility, that restores trust. Then once we start to do what we say we're going to do, it doesn't necessarily happen quickly, but trust is restored. And then I think as we share with people and they hear truth from us and facts from us, especially in crisis, people really need to hear the truth, not my made up story about how great I am, but they need the truth. And because people need that so that they can trust, because they're already nervous. And so this really helps them in the process of restoring trust.
So good. So good. You know, and I think as I'm hearing you talk, I think that it is possible as a leader, you know, or as somebody who's kind of has responsibilities, to feel sometimes, man, I messed up. I'm not going to be able to get that back, you know. So this is very, very helpful and practical advice. One thing that I admire about you, Courtney, every interaction I've had with you, I really admire, despite your experience and your stature spiritually as a pastor, if I can say it that way, you've always come off with true humility. And I really appreciate that, because I've been around leaders and people and pastors who don't necessarily come off that way. So here's the next question. How have you developed your own sense of humility? And what advice would you give leaders who recognize that they need more humility?
Well, you know, like you said earlier, I've got a lot of worn tread on these tires. I've been at this 47 years, and 47 years gives you a chance. Someone said, man, that's a lot of success. Oh yeah, it's a lot of failure too. And that's one of the things about every home run king, every guy that's thrown the most completed passes, everybody who has the most 3-pointers are also the guys who missed the most, thrown the most interceptions, and struck out the most because you don't win without trying. So I think the beauty of it is if you can look at how many you struck out. I hit 50 home runs, but I struck out 150 times hitting those 50 home runs. As long as you can see the balance between the strikeouts and the home runs, that in itself keeps you humble, because you know that 67% of the time I strike out. So it shows me my own flaws and my own humility. So I think to have a real healthy view about your strikeout, I think helps create humility. And then for me, Verge, I've often said to people, I just can't figure out what people have to be proud of, especially people in ministry, because it's like, what did you do that it was actually you? I mean, other than the dumb stuff. But
so true.
I mean, outside the dumb stuff, so if people come to faith into your church grows, excuse me, that wasn't you. You just were used to help the process. So I think a healthy view then of who our real resource is also helps to build a sense of humility. And then I think the final one, Virgil, is a heart to want to pull people close to you also helps you create a heart of humility, because nobody really wants to be around an egotistical person. So if you have any desire to add value to people or to help people in their journey, then you want to keep yourself in the right space, because nobody likes a jerk. It's a spiritual principle.
Yeah.
I think it's the 11th commandment: thou shalt not be a jerk. And so
is that King James or NIV?
That's in all of them. That's even in the New Living Translation. So it's in all of them. So I just kind of feel that way about what we do, is that one of the things that keeps me, because what humility really is, it's just a real honest view of yourself. It's not saying I'm lower. It's not saying I'm higher. It's saying this is all I am at my very best. So I think that helps me to keep that. I remember my failures. I remember who my source is, and I remember who I want to touch. And all of that kind of works together.
That's so good. And I think that's especially good for both young leaders and also for leaders who are stepping into new levels and seasons of growth and influence. I think that's such an important reminder, because it's so easy to fall in the trap of thinking, wow, look what I did. Look how good I am. And I think that's a great point. Now that's you just took us a little bit internally looking in. Now I want to ask a question kind of connected to your teaching as well in the book 4C Leadership. So you talked about collaboration. That's one of the C's. When you're seeking leaders with whom to collaborate, what characteristics, what personality traits, what is it that you're looking for those people that you want to collaborate with? Because I'm sure that there's some people who are great to work with, and then some people maybe aren't so great to work with. What's your advice on this?
Okay, so now I'm going to use a word that's overused, especially during crisis, and so I'm going to leave it up to you to make me take that word apart. But you look for authentic people, because you got to have people that are real. I wasn't necessarily, in my collaboration efforts, I'm not even necessarily looking at somebody who believes everything the same way I do. Because I'd actually rather have an authentic person who didn't have all the exact same worldview, as opposed to an inauthentic person who just sees everything just like I do and reads the book just like I read it. Because I found that authenticity is greater common ground for working together than necessarily totally shared beliefs. There's some fundamentals that I'm going to kind of need you to believe, but then beyond that, we have so many different liturgical styles and worship styles and those kind of things, and sacraments and all. And I found that since a lot of our collaboration is not inside the church, but it's in the community.
Mm.
That finding authentic people is what really makes the difference. So I start with authenticity, and then competency. You know, people who are actually good at what they
Yeah.
do is helpful, and then look for people who are dependable, that they do what they say they're going to do. One of the things I discussed in the book, this next level of collaboration, is you want to look for people who have some similar goals, because if the goals are similar, it aligns you with them and you can work towards some things. And people who may have different strengths than you have. What you don't want to do is what oftentimes leaders unfortunately do, is get everybody in the room who's just like them. But you want people who are different than you, who have different strengths, so that you cover more ground. If not, it's no need to co-labor if it's going to be just like one person doing, just a lot of people doing the exact same thing. Then that kind of kills the whole co-laboring process.
So good. I love that. I'm trying to take notes here as you're talking, because this is great advice on what to look for in those people you're collaborating with: authenticity, competency, dependable, diversification of skills, so we can kind of reach out more. It's funny because as you're talking about those things, it's things that we also see in the character of Jesus. He was authentic.
Yes.
He was definitely competent. He
Yeah.
does what he says he's going to do. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I agree with you. I think that the answer is not necessarily somebody who believes and thinks the same way as I do. Although that's not a limiting factor. It's more the authenticity, right, and even the kind of, as you were saying, just the willingness, the heart. Good stuff. I love this. Hey, I think, Courtney, everybody, the further you get in the book, in the C's, because we're talking about the 4C leadership lessons learned from the COVID crisis, every C gets more kind of exciting as you go on, because you start realizing, wow, it's not rocket science, but it's not natural. Like you have to think about it. And I think that the way that you put it in the book, it makes it practical. It makes it reachable, whether you're a new leader or whether you're a seasoned leader. This is so good. I have another question. You ready to move on? Next question.
Yes,
Here we
sir.
go.
Whenever you're ready.
Let's see. How would you suggest leaders promote and model collaboration for their teams? How can we encourage those that we lead to seek out new partnerships and new connections?
Well, you know what, Verge, I think this one is just doing it. I think when my team sees me collaborating with other leaders who are senior leaders or senior pastors or senior business folks or whatever, I think the more they see me do it, that is the model for it. And what it does is my ability to trust other people to work with me encourages them to trust other people to work with them. Their collaboration may be more internal than external because of my particular role in the city or in our region. I may be found doing more extra collaboration outside of the organization, but it will encourage my team members to do the same thing internally, and when the opportunity arises, to go for it externally as well. So I think just doing it and then talking about it, rejoicing about it. I know sometimes we're, as leaders, sometimes we do good things, but then we complain about them after we do them. And nobody really wants to, if you really didn't enjoy it, I really don't want to follow your example and do something that, you know, that made you frustrated. So I've got to come out of my collaboration and, man, this is amazing. I got together with so-and-so and so-and-so, and this thing happened. If I come back saying, man, oh my God, Lord, please never let me have to work with these guys again. So, you know, my team doesn't get very inspired by that. And I think we have to kind of be careful as leaders. If you let me just take this one step further, I think we have to model our words with people, because I know you grew up as in a pastor's house.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like we always say to folks, when you go home from church, there's not an invisible shield between the back seat and the front seat, so that the grown people can say all kind of negative things about the church, and the kids in the back just somehow don't hear any of that. They hear all of that, take it all in, absorb it all. So I mean, imagine what would have happened if your dad or our spiritual fathers, if they had been so negative about what they were doing that it made us think, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I think part of the way we model collaboration on any level is by learning to be positive about the results. And even if everything doesn't turn out perfectly, there's still always something good that we can find.
So good. I find what you're saying is so true, because if we want to be able to do more, we have to collaborate, because no one person, no one organization, no one church, no one pastor, no one leader can do it all. So collaboration is key. And if we really want our team members, the leaders that are under us, the people that we're influencing, to catch on to that, to embrace that, we have to not only model it, but we have to speak of it in a positive light. Okay, so kind of connected to that, and you mentioned a little while ago this concept, which is important, of adding value. Can you provide everybody who's listening or watching some concrete ways that we can add value to others outside of our organization? I'm always going to be wanting to add value to those who are here next to me in my organization, but how do we, in a practical way, add value to people outside of our organizations?
Well, you know what? I think the principles can be applied in both spaces. So for those who may need a little bit more on adding value internally, this can help them too. One of the things that I do is I look for people who are doing great things and tell them what a great thing that they're doing. So that always adds value to people, because so often we know it as leaders that people can find so many things wrong with what we're doing, and it seems they struggle to find anything good with it. And so for every leader, if you can find something good they're doing and let them know, boy, I appreciate this about you. I love what your church is doing in this. I love what you all are tackling over here. Just appreciate it so much. I think that builds people. Studying other people and what they do and what's important to them, learning about them also always adds value. One of my little complaints about the American church is that oftentimes, if we would learn to do the things at home that we teach people to do when they go to the mission field, we'd be a lot more effective at home. When we send people to global mission, we say, go in there, encourage people, study what they do, study their culture, study their language, just dive in and become a part. Don't try to impose your own, whatever, but we should just try applying a little bit of that down the street, since when you look at our neighborhoods and communities, they're very diverse too. It's like you can walk around our neighborhoods, it's like walking around the world, because you'll find folks from Latin America, from Africa, from Europe, from Russia, from Asia, from wherever, and you'll find people of different religious styles, and learning about their style and say, man, I think it's beautiful that you guys do this. It's different from us, and then finally, I think living by this. I don't love you in spite of our differences. I love you even more because we're different. As if God made us like this, he must have seen something really beautiful in all these differences. And so when I want to add value to people externally, one of the things that I want them to know is I don't need you to become like me or change or say it like me or pray like me. I love you for how you do it. And I'm appreciative of the diversity. And all of that, I think, helps to add value to people outside. And when you do that, it makes collaboration a whole lot easier when people feel appreciated by you.
So good. I'll speak for myself. I know that when people add value to me, I want to be around them more.
Absolutely.
when people speak life into me or to people that I love or to our, I'm like, okay, let's hang out, let's connect. And so I think if we're really intentional in that, like you're saying, Courtney, of outside of organizations. Obviously, we can do it internally. We must do it internally if we want to have a flourishing, good, healthy culture. But this is a good way to build bridges with organizations, with people, and those who are outside. I want to transition a little into the communication, to the sea of communication here. I really enjoyed this part of the book as well, because I think there's so much that sometimes we don't realize how important effective communication is. So here we go. Why do you think internal communication often breaks down more than external communication?
Okay. Because I think it's just like communication in our families and in our homes. Too much is taken for granted. I know that I'm going to have to be communicating at level 10 when I go outside of my church, because I'm not necessarily known. They don't necessarily speak the same language. Vision may not be identical. Man, I got to really put it down. At home, man, these guys, they know me. They get it. They understand. But, you know, we're going to be cool no matter what. So I think there's a sense of familiarity internally that oftentimes causes communication to break down. It's almost like how polite we may be with people that are outside the family, and how impolite we may be with people who are in the family.
So true.
And so that's where the breakdown is. Can I be polite and not be formal? Can I be careful with how I communicate internally and not make people feel like a guest or a visitor? I think so. I think there is a way to do that within the context of our internal relationships. There's a way to do that where you still add value to people. You still make people feel loved. You still make people feel special. You know, when I walk in the room and there's staff in there, I want to find somebody in there who just needs me to say, you know what? This last video that you did for us was just crazy, off the chart good. I just don't know how in the world you did that on the salary that I paid you. So you know, you find ways, I think, it takes a little more creativity. Yeah. And it's like you said, it's not rocket science, but it's not natural either. That's a really wise statement. You're going to hear that again, and I might give you credit for it.
Appreciate that. Hey, you know, I think you're right. I think a word we can attach on to that answer is what you're saying is intentionality. We know we can do it, and sometimes we think thoughts. I heard somebody say once, we think sometimes, but we need to say what we think. If I think that was an amazing job, let me not just think it. Let me actually go and say it. You know, let me not just have this internal opinion. Let me externalize it, because now I'm going to add value. I'm going to speak life. I'm going to build up. And you're so right with the whole comparison, how, you know, I know this probably has never happened to you in your marriage. It doesn't happen in my marriage. I've heard of husbands who maybe, you know, are rough or rough around the edges with the wife. And then she asks, well, why are you so nice with everybody else and not me? That doesn't happen to me, Courtney. It's never happened to me.
Of course not.
we tend to be so polite and so correct with externally. And sometimes we lower our guard down. And we make some mistakes internally. So good. Okay, next question. This is good. We got maybe 2 or 3 more questions because I think people are leaning in right now in this conversation. Okay, continuing on with communication. What can communicators do to convey empathy to their audiences in authentic ways?
Okay, now this is one of the ones I love. And, you know, of course, along with the COVID crisis has been the crisis of social injustice and upheavals and all this that's going on nationally and globally that was affecting us all. So I've been talking about empathy, emotional and cognitive empathy. I've been looking at it from 2 sides. The emotional empathy, we get that from the word, weep with those that weep and rejoice with those that rejoice. So we have the ability as humans. Other mammals don't seem to have this ability. As humans, we have this ability to feel what other people feel and then to express that. And we had the greatest example in our Lord, because that's how we came to faith, is because he was empathetic. He did not do anything to deserve what he got, but he cared about us. And so he put himself in our skin, literally put himself in our skin. He put himself in our shoes, literally. So from him, we learn that with, here's your word, intentionality, you can decide to be empathetic. I'm going to sit in their feelings. I may not ever be able to say to them, I know exactly what you feel, but I'm going to think about this long enough to start to have some common sense of, wow, I may not even agree, but I can understand from their perspective why they would feel that way. So I think for communicators, you have to be able to say that I want to feel what you feel. I want a sense of, so if I have to listen to your story for a while, I'll do that because I want to empathize with where you are. And then I think communicators then can bring cognitive empathy, which is, if emotional empathy is feeling what people feel, then cognitive empathy is bringing resources to help people in what they feel. So you lost a loved one, and I felt it, and I prayed for you, and I felt, your pain, because I've been there too. But then I also came by with a meal so that you all wouldn't have to cook tonight, and that'd be one less thing to worry about. That's cognitive empathy. So it's not just feeling what you feel, but it's trying to help so that you can be better where you are. So I think when a communicator understands that, she can stand before people, and it will literally ooze out of them. If something has happened in their heart, it will come out in their words. And I don't think it's not hard to tell when you got it and when you don't. It's real easy for people to pick it up, but you gotta want to have it. You gotta be intentional about it and about showing it too.
That's good. I've heard it said, I think it applies. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely. I mean, and they can say that's worn out if they want, but it's not as true a statement as I've ever heard. I think it started with Sunday school folks were teaching people that about Sunday school. I think is when that statement really won the place it was first used in church. They were reaching out to people, and they said, listen, those people don't, you can be brilliant, know all the lessons, all the verses, but nobody really cares how much you know till they know how much you care. It makes all the difference in the world.
So good. So good. I think one of the things that we need to communicate, especially to our teams and the people that we're leading, is appreciation. And one of the things that I think, and I know this would help me, any insight and advice you can give here, because of the crisis that we're in, the lead leader, the lead pastor, the CEO might be wanting to express or communicate appreciation to staff and volunteers. Here's a question. How can organizations with small budgets or with maybe financial stress like some may be feeling now, how can organizations communicate appreciation to staff and volunteers with budget limitations?
Well, one of the things that our friend and mentor Sam Chan taught me is that it doesn't cost you anything to write a person a note. And he taught me the value of the handwritten note. When someone actually sits down and writes, just want you to know how much I appreciate you, and I'm so glad God put you here. Love you, Courtney. And I take that to you. Didn't cost me anything. Didn't even cost me a stamp if I took it to them. But at the most, it cost me a stamp if I mailed it to them. And a piece of paper and the ink, no cost to that. So I think one of the best ways that we can do that is finding ways like that that don't cost any money to show appreciation. Because if people haven't been getting a lot and they're in a context that's limited in terms of finances, then a note will seem like a very big deal
Yeah.
to them. And the fact that I took my time to write it, one of the things that I did when the COVID crisis hit was I just got a list of folks and I just sat down from my personal email and just started. I took it was like an Excel sheet with just names.
Hmm.
And I would try to go through 40, 50 names a night. And I just say, hey, and this particular group was a group of high capacity givers. I just wrote them a note. Hey, just want to tell you I love you, I appreciate you, and just want to know you got anything I can pray about. And they'd send me back a, wow, is this really you?
Wow.
Yeah, it really is me. But, yeah, I got a couple things. They'd send me a couple prayer requests, and I send them a note back saying, hey, I got your note. I'm going to be praying with you about your cousin and about your family back home. I'm going to be lifting them up this week. And it made all the difference. It made all the difference in the world. So there are things like that that don't cost anything, except time. And
Yep.
that's the one thing. When I don't have any money, I can always afford to give my time.
So good. Something so apparently small can mean something so big, somebody's heart. Yeah,
Yep.
so good. Hey, I have one more question before we share some good news with everybody about how they can get their hands on your book, 4C Leadership. Here's the last question. You were talking a little bit about the last C, which is contingency, how sometimes some people might think, some people might over spiritualize and think that that's not a, contingency doesn't align, but can you give some examples of how contingency thinking can actually be a positive thing?
Absolutely. Now, I thought about Acts chapter 2 and the contingency plan because none of the disciples were expecting the kind of response that they got the first day they stood up to pray. So they get thousands of people. And since we know oftentimes in the New Testament, they don't even count the kids or even the ladies.
Mm-hmm.
So what was 3,000 is probably 10,000 or 12,000 that all come in. So what's the contingency plan for that? Well, I'm sure they didn't have one on their iPad, but immediately they says, okay, you're going to go home with so-and-so. You guys break bread over here. You guys sit over here. You get over here. And suddenly a contingency plan broke out and small groups were born and people just started being together, working together because of this wasn't Peter's plan. His plan was to get up and say something that he hoped might help a couple people, or at least keep them from killing him like they killed Jesus. And then instead of getting killed for the message or getting threatened to be killed, they were mobbed by people who wanted the same faith that they had. So where's the contingency in that? The contingency is, okay, what are we going to do? We've never done this before. Let's just get people go, because we don't have a big building. Let's just get people going to people's houses and getting taught, and they can eat there, and they can do prayer there, and they can do, and miracles can happen there, and it all happened. It's contingency. On the other hand, something as simple as the emergency plan for if something happens in the building, how do we get out? Who's in charge? What's our response? Who calls 911? Who makes sure that the children are okay? Those kinds of things are contingency plans. They are the plan that's based on fortuitousness or a happening that was not properly planned for, or maybe could not have been planned for, but yet we knew that because there's a possibility, we need to have some type of plan just in case. My succession plan is contingency planning because I'm not always going to be here. Don't know exactly how long that's going to be, but here's what we do know. you are leaving at some point. That's what we know. so if we are leaving at some point, then let's plan for that and put a contingency plan in place so that we're ready for it. COVID-19, oh, that's going to be over in 60 days. If it's not, what are you guys going to do? Is there a contingency plan for that? So what I've discovered virtually is that contingency planning does not in any way bespeak a lack of faith or trust in God. It's an admission that I'm not God.
Right.
So I don't know everything. And so I have to plan for some things that I don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen.
I like that a lot. So a contingency plan is remembering I'm not God. And that's why I have to have some things in place. And I have to ask the Lord to give me wisdom. I love that. Hey, This has been such a great time, Courtney. I think everybody who's listening, watching this right now is so blessed. And I want to just take advantage right now and let everybody know that you can get the 4C Leadership book. Remember, I said at the beginning, part of Avail Leadership, we are a Christian leader brand. We want to provide resources that are going to bless every leader and any leader, but we especially are targeting people that love God and people that love people. And so you can get 4C Leadership book for free. I know that doesn't sound right. It sounds like it doesn't make sense. Courtney, I know that some people might think we're going crazy right now. But if you go to availleadership.org/4C, I'm going to say that one more time, availleadership.org/4C, you're going to be able to get the book for free. And the reason it is because we have people who love God and who love leaders, and we want to get this book in your hands. Now, here's the deal. All you got to do is go to availleadership.org/4C and say, I want to get my free book, 4C Leadership. The only thing you're going to have to cover is the shipping, okay? But you're going to have an option, and I'm going to highly encourage this option. I think we've been added value today. Bishop Courtney McBath has brought some great value to us in this conversation, and let me tell you, not only is the book good, you can actually upgrade to the masterclass bundle. And let me tell you what it includes. It includes not only the book, but it has a companion study guide, which is going to be a great way to kind of document what you're learning as you're reading through the book. Also, here we go, drum roll, masterclass videos, 12-part online video course. And just as engaging and optimistic and encouraging as Courtney has been here on this conversation, on this podcast, that's how the videos are. And so the masterclass upgrade is going to include the book, the study guide, the 12-part video course, and it's just a powerful resource that we want to place in your hands. This is our heart at Avail Leadership. And so every month, again, at Avail Leadership, we're coming out with new leadership books and resources. And right now, we are highlighting the book by Courtney McBath, 4C Leadership, Lessons Learned from the COVID Crisis. Courtney, this has been so good. I think we could be here, honestly, for some more time, but we're going to wrap it up. What are some last words, last nuggets of wisdom you want to throw out to everybody who's listening?
Well, the thing that I love about God and leading and adding value to people is that when crisis hits, God does his greatest work. I've often said in the middle of chaos is another C. In the middle of chaos is when God really shows out. So because he gets honor and he gets glory. And I just want to say to folks, we're in a crisis, and there'll be more crises as we go through our leadership journey. But the God that we serve, his book was written in crisis. When you read scripture, you'll find that 95% of the time that what's actually recorded, and we know more happened than what's recorded, but most of what's recorded is happening in crisis. Esther's in crisis. Nehemiah's in crisis. The world is in crisis. In the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's crisis everywhere. It's God's way of saying, hey guys, I got this. In crisis, we're good. You just learn how to understand your context, communicate to people you're trying to reach, collaborate with other folk, and don't try to do it all yourself. And have a plan in case the plan that you think is the plan doesn't quite work out. Have another one just in case. I decided, God said, just in case I decided to do it another way. I really believe that God amazingly is blessing. The church is growing around the world during this crisis. And I hate the loss of life and everything that we've seen that has saddened our hearts and broken our hearts. But I love the fact that God does not give up on us in crisis, and he doesn't stop moving in crisis. So the book's values, while born and birthed in crisis, will help you wherever you are, even if you don't feel like you're in a crisis. Because as I love to tell people, it may not be a crisis for you, it may be a crisis for somebody else.
So good. So good. Hey, Courtney, thank you so much for taking this time to not only answer some questions, but to bring some great wisdom, practical leadership advice. This means a lot to myself, to all the leaders that are connecting and listening to this podcast, watching this video. What a blessing it is. Thank you so much to you. We just honor you and your family and your church for all the things that you've done, that you're doing, and that you're going to continue to do. And I want to thank everybody who's taken some time to connect with us. We hope that this has added value to your life and to your leadership. Again, that's our heart at Avail Leadership, to bring quality, practical leadership resources that are going to make a difference, that are going to bless your life, bless your organization, bless your leadership. On behalf of the Avail Leadership team, my name is Virgil Sierra, your Avail Leadership media host. It's been a pleasure connecting with you. We'll catch you next time here at Avail Leadership Podcast.